Level 2, just below the surface. Firmware updates. One of the first things that you should do when buying a Digitakt is to check its firmware version. This is because firmware updates have introduced new features that help the Digitakt achieve its iconic status. To do so, you will need the Elektron transfer software. After connecting the Digitakt to the computer, open Transfer. Then, set Digitakt as MIDI in and MIDI out in the connection dialog box and click Connect. Download the OS file from Elektron's support page, and then drag and drop it to the drop section of Transfer. The Digitakt will ask you if you want to initiate the OS update. Tap Yes to start it. At the time of recording, the latest firmware version was 1.52a. Data entry knobs. The Digitakt has a group of 8 encoders labeled from A to H. These are called the data entry knobs. They control the parameters found in the different pages or sections of the Digitakt. Sounds and sound pool. Sounds and sound pool are concepts used by the Digitakt. A sound is a sample and all its related parameters such as filter, amplitude, and LFO settings. Sounds can be stored in the internal plus drive sound library. A sound pool is a group of sounds used by a project. Each sound pool can have a maximum of 128 sounds. To add a sound to the sound pool, press Function and Song Mode to open the Import-Export menu. Song Mode is the key with the 3 dots. Select Manage Sounds, and this will open the Sound Manager. Select the sound you want to copy and press Yes. Note that you can select multiple sounds at the same time. Then, press Right and select Copy To. Select Sound Pool and press Yes. To select a sound to be used in a track, select a track you wish to use and press Function and Level Data. Scroll and select the sound you want. Note that you can use Function and Yes to preview a sound. If it's the one you want, press Yes to load it. Audio track pages. In the Digitakt, the different sample parameters are divided by sections. In Elektron terminology, these sections are called pages, and each one of them has a dedicated key right below the data entry knobs. Also note that each of these pages have more than one screen with options. This can be accessed by tapping the page button more than once. There are 5 pages. Trig controls parameters related to trigs. Note sets the pitch of the note when triggered. Velocity will change its velocity when triggered. Length will set the length of the note trigger. Probability sets the probability that the trigs on the track will play or not. If you select a particular step, this specific option changes to condition, and any changes to the probability here will only affect the selected trigger. We will expand on this later. Finally, filter trigger and LFO trigger define if the filter envelope or LFO will be triggered or not. Source controls the playback of samples. The parameters seen here are dependent on the machine used, and I'll expand on this later. The default, which is one shot, allows changing the tuning, play direction, bit reduction, sample used, also the start point, the length and loop point, and also the volume level of the specific sample used. Filter controls the multimode filter and its envelope. In page 1, you'll find controls for the attack, decay, sustain, and release of the envelope. You can also change the frequency and resonance of the filter, and also change its type between low pass, high pass, and EQ. Note that the EQ settings range from 1 to 5, and these signify 5 points in the frequency range of the sound. This is helpful in case you want to boost low frequencies, for example. Finally, you can also change the envelope depth, which controls the amount of cutoff frequency modulation from the filter envelope. This modulation can be positive or negative. Page 2 controls the base width filter and the envelope delay. The base width filter is basically a high pass and a low pass filter that you can use at the same time. Use this filter for permanent changes to the sound, and the main filter for more performative actions. You can also adjust the amount of sample rate reduction, or SRR, of the sample, and if it should be done before or after the filters in the signal flow by using the pre and post values of the route parameter. Amp sets the amplitude envelope, overdrive, effects, panning, and volume. Attack, hold, and decay affect the amp envelope stages. The hold value controls the length of the hold stage of the envelope. If you select a value between 0 and 126, you will specify a specific length, and the envelope will always follow that length. On the other hand, if you select Note, the whole stage will be determined by how long a note is held. Overdrive controls how much distortion is introduced to the sound. Delay and reverb are effects that can be added to the signal. Panning determines where the sound is placed in the stereo field. And volume determines the volume of the sound, and it's independent of the track level. LFO, or low frequency oscillator, can be used to modulate parameters found in the other pages. Each audio track can have two LFOs affecting different parameters. Page 1 controls LFO 1. You can set the speed and the multiplier of the speed of the LFO. If you want to sync the LFO to the beat, use 8, 16, or 32 as a speed value. For example, a multiplier of 32 and a speed of 32 will make the LFO run at 1/8. You can also set the fade in or out of the modulation. The knob is bipolar, so positive values will provide a fade out and negative values will provide a fade in. A value of 0 nullifies the fading. Destination determines what parameter is affected by the modulation. Wave sets the type of wave that it's used. You can use a sine, a triangle, a square, a sawtooth, or random waveforms. And you can also use exponential and ramp. Phase sets where the LFO is triggered in the wave cycle. Mode defines how the LFO will act when a note is triggered. Free is a default and means that the LFO will run continuously, never restarting or stopping, even if notes are triggered. Trigger will make the LFO restart when a note is triggered. Here are the available options. Hold makes the LFO play freely in the background, but whenever a note is triggered, the LFO level is frozen until the next note is triggered. 1 means the LFO starts when a note is triggered, then runs until the end of the waveform and then stops. This makes the LFO act like an envelope. Finally, with half, the LFO starts when a note is triggered, then runs until the middle of the waveform. When it reaches halfway, it stops. The last parameter is depth, and it determines how deep the modulation should go and also its polarity. The second page of LFO controls LFO 2, and it has the same options as LFO 1. MIDI track pages. The MIDI tracks also have pages, and these have their own specific settings. They are accessed the same way as audio pages. The Trig page controls what and how the MIDI notes are played. You can choose a root note in note 1, and then in note 2, 3, and 4, you can select additional notes to make chords. Note that if you change note 1, or the root note, notes 2, 3, and 4 will be transposed accordingly. Velocity sets the velocity of the notes, and length sets the note length. Length can be set as infinite if you wish. Probability sets the probability of a note being triggered on the track. Just like the audio trigger page, if you select a particular step, this changes to condition. Finally, LFO trigger defines if the LFO should be triggered or not. The source page is used to set up the MIDI information for the track. Channel defines a MIDI channel that the track should send data to. Bank lets you send a bank change message. SBNK sends a sub-bank change message. Prog sends a program change message. PB controls pitch bend. AT sends aftertouch data. MW sends mod wheel data. And finally, BC sends breath control data. To activate any of these parameters, you will need to hold function and then press the respective encoder. Then you can change the values. The filter and amp pages are used together to set CC values for CC commands. CC, or continuous controller, is a type of MIDI message that allows for one device to control parameters on another device remotely. Each MIDI track can control up to 8 parameters on the target device. To set up the controllable parameters, go to the amp page and use the data entry knobs to select the CC number for the different slots. You will need to look up the MIDI implementation chart of the target device in order to find the right CC numbers. Also note that the controllable parameters are locked to the MIDI channel previously selected. This means that you cannot control multiple devices on the same track. Additionally, if you have a device that uses multiple MIDI channels, such as the circuit tracks where each track has a specific channel, you will need to find the right channel as well. On the other hand, if you need to control more than 8 parameters, nothing stops you from setting up multiple MIDI tracks with the same MIDI channel and setting up additional CC commands for each. To control the parameters, access the filter page and use the respective knob. Note that you will need to use function and the respective knob to activate it. Finally, the LFO page is pretty much the same as the audio track's LFO page. The only difference is that the destinations are now related to the MIDI information that you set up before. This means that you can modulate the CC commands you have set up in the AMP page, for example. Also, there's only one LFO for MIDI tracks instead of the two that you find in audio tracks. Secondary pages. Below the pages' keys, you'll find labels for the secondary pages. These can be accessed by holding function and pressing the respective key. Quantize sets the quantization globally or for each track. Quantization basically defines how close to standard timings a trigger note should be. If 0, notes will be played in the exact timing they were recorded. As you increase quantization, recorded notes will become more and more in time with the sequencer timing. Assign changes the machine type for the audio track, and we'll discuss this later. Delay and reverb specify the settings for these effects for the selected pattern. We will also talk about this later in their entry. Finally, master contains sections for the compressor, internal mixer, and external mixer. We'll expand on these later on as well. Function key. The function key is the only colored button in the Digitakt, in orange. With it, you can access secondary functions of the keys, usually labeled right below them. Here are some other uses for the function key. You can use function and up or down to move faster in lists and menus. You can also press function in the name entry menu to access the letter table and select letters much quicker. In certain parameters, you can hold function and twist the knob to jump to specific positions. These can be time sync values or specific semitone values, for example. Internal mixer. The internal mixer allows you to adjust the volume level of all 8 audio tracks at the same time. To get to it, press function and LFO twice to get to the second section of the master page. External mixer. The external mixer is where you adjust the audio that comes in through the audio input ports. To get to it, press function and LFO 3 times to get to the third section of the master page. You have the option of using the audio input separately if you want. This is called dual mono. To activate it, use the level data knob to change the dual option. If, on the other hand, you have a stereo device you want to use, deactivate this option. In the other options, you can set the panning of the input and add delay or reverb to it. Sampling. The Digitakt has great sampling capabilities. You can sample audio coming from the audio inputs through USB and even from its own internal audio. Press the sampling key to access the sampling menu. Start by setting the source. Use the respective encoder to change between input, main, USB, and track 1 through 8. Input records audio from the audio inputs in the back. Main records the Digitakt's own internal audio. USB records audio coming in from the USB connection. For each, you have the option to record the left, right, or left and right channels together. Finally, selecting track 1 through 8 records the audio coming in from that specific audio track. RLEN sets the recording length. The default is max, which records up to 33 seconds, but you can use this to limit the length to a number of steps. This is useful in case you want to record a loop, for example. ARM and THR are meant to be used together. Arming the device means that when you press record, it will wait until the audio reaches a specific volume threshold. This threshold is set by the other option I mentioned, THR. Use this in case you want to sample another instrument that you need to play and want to avoid having to cut the silence at the start. If you just want to record, then press function and yes, and it will start right away. Then use yes to stop the recording. Finally, Mon is the monitoring setting. Setting it to yes means that you will hear the incoming audio from the inputs. If you are already hearing the audio through the external mixer, then this option might be a little confusing. When this option is activated, the input audio is summed to mono and no external mixer effects will be heard. The live audio will also be stopped when the recording is finished and the trimming screen is shown. The external mixer will be deactivated until you switch off monitoring. After recording, you can use the encoders to trim the start and end of the sample. You can use the zoom encoders to help you with this too. After trimming, press yes to confirm or no to reset. Press function and yes to preview the sample. If you want the sample to loop, press left. When everything is good, press yes to save the sample. Name it to something you want, and then press yes again. After that, you can either select a track to load the sample in, or just press no if you don't want to assign it now. Effects. The Digitakt has 5 different effects that you can apply to the audio: delay, reverb, compressor, overdrive, and bit reduction. These are not all in the same place, nor they can be used in the same way. Delay and reverb can be added on a per track basis and also in the input audio. I've mentioned where you can add these to tracks before, but there are 2 specific pages where you can define the settings for these effects. Use function and filter to access the delay settings and function and amp to access the reverb settings. In the delay settings, you can set the delay time, activate ping pong, change the stereo width, and change the amount of feedback. In case you're wondering, ping pong means that the delay you hear will alternate in the stereo field. It's a cool effect, especially because the Digitakt is mono, so this adds some stereo pack to the sample. Back to the delay page, you can also set the low and high pass filter for it, send the delay to the reverb, and also adjust the volume of the delay. In the reverb settings, you can change the pre-delay of the reverb, the decay, the frequency filter, and its gain. Use the decay to add a longer or shorter reverb. Long decays are great for transitions. The frequency filter and gain can be used to cut frequencies from the reverb, basically making it more or less noticeable. Like the delay, you can also have a low pass and high pass filter. The rev option has 2 settings, pre and post comp. This defines if reverb should be applied before or after the compressor. This can change how the reverb sounds together with the main signal. Try and see what you enjoy the most. And finally, volume sets the volume of the reverb. Here's something to note about reverb and delay. By default, their settings are set per pattern. This means that each pattern can have their own settings to make them stand out. However, if you'd like to have the same delay and reverb settings in all patterns for a project, you can activate an option in the settings to make them global. I will talk about this in another entry. The Digitakt contains another effect called compressor. A compressor compresses dynamic range of the signal. It reduces the volume of loud sounds relative to quiet sounds. This can basically glue your mix and make it sound more cohesive. In the Digitakt, the compressor is a master effect, meaning it will be applied to all of the audio together. To access it, press function and LFO once. To avoid going to a long tangent about how compressors work, I will just list the options. In this screen, you can adjust the threshold, attack, and release of the compressor. You can also change the makeup gain, the ratio, the overall volume, add a sidechain source and a sidechain filter, and adjust the dry and wet mix. But I don't want to leave you with just this dry information, so here are some tips. Be advised that I'm not a professional and I usually go with what sounds good to me. I find that having a threshold at 1/3 from the end with a fast attack and mid-release works well to get a slapping sound. Makeup gain allows you to gain back some of the volume that you lose due to compressing. I usually don't get too crazy with the ratio, 4 or 8 works well. And I also usually don't mess with the sidechain features as they tend to not sound that good to me. The dry and wet mix allows you to be like Hannah Montana and have the best of both worlds by having the compressed and uncompressed signals mixed. Don't sleep on the compressor. Make sure you experiment because it can make a huge difference in how good a beat sounds. Trust me. Also, just like delay and reverb, by default, the compressor is set per pattern, but you can change this and make its options global in the settings. Finally, overdrive and bit reducer are track effects, and they do not have many settings. In fact, they only have one, which is to set the amount. Either way, they can help give your sample a little bit of character. You'll find overdrive in the amp page. It will distort the sound. And bit reduction is labeled BR in the source page. It will reduce the resolution of the sample, making it more lo-fi. Volume levels. Technically, there are 3 different ways of adjusting the volume of an audio track. You can do it at the track level, at the sample level, and at the amp level. However, there are some considerations to have before choosing what specific parameter to use. According to the signal path, the first volume control in the chain is sample level. The sample level feeds the overdrive parameter. This means that if the sample level is low, the overdrive will not affect the sound that much. Sample level is also important in case you're using multiple samples on the audio track. Since different sounds may have different levels, you can use parameter locks to change the sample level depending on the samples used. This will stabilize the volume across all samples within the same track. The next volume parameter in the single path is amp level, which comes after overdrive. This will control how much volume is fed to the filter. Like overdrive, the volume level may change the character of the sound because of the filter. A more important aspect of the amp level is that it can be set independently of the effect sense. In practice, this means that, for example, if you want to adjust the volume of a track but still hear the delay or reverb, you will need to adjust the amp level. Track level is the last volume parameter. The internal mixer contains all track inputs, so you can adjust them all at the same time. You will also notice that most page screens have a level parameter on the far left. This is a track level parameter, the same as the one in the internal mixer. This is useful because you can quickly set the volume wherever you are using the level data knob. However, note that the track level will lower everything on that track, including the effect volume. This means that both the dry signal and the delay and reverb signal will be lowered. The benefit of using amp level instead of track level is that you can have a tail on the fade out of a track, which is nice to set up transitions and move between song parts. Tempo and swing. You can change the tempo and swing of a pattern in the tempo menu. To access it, press the tempo key. Then use the level data knob to change the BPM of the pattern. You can use up and down to change the tempo in fractional steps. Tempo can be set per pattern or globally. To adjust this, press Function and Yes. On the right side of the screen, you will find Swing. Swing adds variation to the rhythm so it sounds more organic. You can use the respective encoder to adjust it. Loading samples. If you wish to load a sample from your storage to a track, press the Settings key. Then scroll down and enter Samples. Use the arrow keys to select the sample you want to use and then press Yes. Note that you can use Function and Yes to preview a sample. Press Right and then select Load to Project. This will load the sample to the first available spot in the sample list. You can select multiple samples at the same time if you want. Then hold Track and select the trig of the track where you want to use the sample. Press Source and use knob D to scroll to the right sample and press the encoder again. And now you're done. Metronome. The Digitakt has a metronome, which can use to be in time when you're live recording beats. To activate it, press Function and PTN, which means pattern. If you hold the same combination, you will open the metronome menu. Here, you can change the time signature, set pre-roll bars, and also adjust the volume of the metronome. In case you're wondering, the pre-roll bar setting sets how many bars the metronome will count before actually starting to record. Chromatic Mode. If you have a melodic sample, you can use Chromatic Mode to play it in different notes. To activate it, select the track that you want to use. Then, press Function and Track. This will enable a layout in the Trigs that imitates a piano. If you want to change octaves, press up or down. Import/Export. This menu allows you to manage the sounds on the Digitakt. You can access it in the settings, inside the pattern menu, or by pressing Function and Song Mode key. Use this menu to import sounds from the plus drive, export sounds, and also manage sounds, which will open a specific menu. We will discuss this menu in a later entry. Also, do remember that sounds are basically presets in the Digitakt world, and not the actual samples. Trigs. In this iceberg, you will hear a lot about trigs. Trigs are the steps in a sequence, and they trigger a specific sound. Recording a sequence. There are 3 ways to record the sequence. You can use grid recording, you can use live recording, and you can use step recording. In grid recording, you will add sample trigs using the steps in the sequencer. To use this method, just press Record. Then, tap the steps where you wish to add the sample. To remove steps, just tap the key again. If your sequence is longer than 16 steps, use the page key to jump between sequence pages. Notice how the LED shows the page that you're currently editing. Here's a pro tip. You can press Trig and Yes to preview a specific step. And another pro tip, if you need to shift all of the steps forward or backward in the sequence, press Function and left or right. Next, we have live recording. In this mode, the trigs are added in real time. To use this mode, hold Record and press Play. Notice how Record flashes instead of continuously being lit. Now just tap the trigs for the tracks that you want to use. Any changes you make using the data entry knobs will also be recorded. If you activate Chromatic Mode, you will also be able to record the different notes played in real time. To delete steps, hold No and 1 or more of the track trigs. Steps will be deleted in real time as you hold these keys, so you can use this to delete just a portion or all of the sequence. To exit live recording and keep the sequencer playing, press play. Finally, we have step recording. In this mode, you'll insert notes by pressing the Trigs. The sequencer will capture the note and automatically move to the next step. There are two sub-modes for step recording, standard and jump. Standard is activated by pressing record and stop. The record key will start double blinking. Now, press one of the 16 trigs to select the start point. The active step will be shown in green. You can use left and right to select the active step or skip steps. Now, use function in one of the 16 trigs to add a note trig on the corresponding track. If you want to change tracks, press track and one of the 16 trigs. You can also use chromatic mode in step recording if you wish. To remove a trig or add a rest, position the active step on the trig you wish to adjust and press no. That's it for standard mode. For jump mode, the land parameter on the trig page controls the note length of the trig you add and advances the active step forward according to that length. Everything else works the same way. Mute modes. Most drum machines have a mute feature. This feature allows you to mute a whole instrument or track while the others keep playing. This is a highly useful performative feature. To quickly mute on the Digitakt, hold function and press one of the 16 track trigs. You can also activate mute mode so the mute keys are always visible. To do this, press function and bank. However, the Digitakt has two different mute modes. Global mute mode mutes tracks in all patterns. This is the default mode, and you can tell that the Digitakt is in this mode if the keys are green during mute mode. Pattern mute mode only mutes the tracks in the active pattern. You can tell you're in pattern mute mode when the mute color is violet. If you want to activate the pattern mute mode, hold function and double press bank. In global mute, the mute settings are saved together with the project. In pattern mute, the settings are saved per pattern. Do note that you can use both at the same time. Stop and play. This will seem obvious, but you can use the stop button to stop playback. There's more to it though. If you press stop once, the delay and reverb will keep playing. However, if you double press stop, the effects will also quickly fade out. On the other hand, if you want to pause the sequence, you can press play while the sequence is playing. And when you press play again, the sequence will be resumed.